My 5-year-old son tugged on the sleeve of a stranger standing in front of a white marble headstone at Arlington National Cemetery. The man was maybe 60, silver-haired, wearing a faded green field jacket with patches I recognized instantly. My boy looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes, his father's eyes, and said, "Excuse me, sir. Did you know my daddy?" The man's face changed. Not slowly. All at once. Like a window breaking from the inside. He looked at me. He looked at the name on the stone. And then his knees buckled and he dropped right there onto the wet grass and he pulled my son into his arms and said, "I did, buddy. I knew your daddy. He saved my life." I stood there in the November cold with my hand pressed against my mouth, shaking. Because I had spent 3 years being told by my husband's own family that Marcus had been ordinary. Forgettable. That I was holding on to a ghost. But to understand how we got here, you have to go back to 2016. I met Marcus Davis at a Waffle House off Route 29 in Charlottesville, Virginia, at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I was 26, finishing my master's in social work at UVA. He was 28, a staff sergeant in the Army, home on leave visiting his mother in Culpeper. He ordered a pecan waffle and a coffee, black. I ordered hash browns, scattered, smothered, and covered. He noticed my textbook on the counter, Trauma-Informed Care in Clinical Practice, and asked if it was any good. I told him it was dry but important. He smiled and said, "That describes most things worth doing." We were married 14 months later. Marcus was the middle child of 3 boys. His older brother, Keith, was the golden son. Sales director at a commercial real estate firm in Richmond, drove a BMW, had the kind of confidence that fills a room whether you want it to or not. His younger brother, Damon, was the baby, 32 and still borrowing money from their mother, Patricia, every few months for what he called business opportunities that never materialized. Marcus was the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who sent $400 home every month from his deployment pay because Patricia's roof needed replacing and neither Keith nor Damon offered a dime. Patricia was not a cruel woman. I wanted to be careful about that. He loved Marcus. But she loved him the way some people love a sturdy table. They lean on it every day without once thinking about the weight it carries. When Keith closed a deal, she posted about it on Facebook. When Damon started a new venture, she called everyone to share the news. When Marcus earned a commendation in Afghanistan, she said, "That's nice, baby," and changed the subject to Keith's new house. Marcus never complained. Not once. He'd just smile, that slow, patient smile, and say, "Mama's got her ways." In 2019, Marcus deployed for his 3rd tour. By then our son Elijah was 18 months old. I remember the morning he left. 5:15 a.m., still dark, the air smelling like frost and engine exhaust on the tarmac at Fort Bragg. He kissed Elijah's forehead 17 times. I counted. He didn't come home. The notification officers arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in October. I was folding Elijah's laundry. Little dinosaur shirts. I remember the exact pair of socks in my hand, tiny, green with orange stripes. The doorbell rang and I saw 2 uniforms through the glass and the socks fell on the floor and I didn't pick them up for 3 days. Marcus was killed by an IED outside Kunduz. He was 31 years old. The funeral was enormous. Full military honors. The flag, the rifles, the bugle. Patricia wept. Keith stood stone-faced in a charcoal suit. Damon showed up 20 minutes late. And afterward, at the reception in Patricia's living room in Culpeper, surrounded by casseroles and relatives I barely knew, Keith pulled me aside and said something I will never forget. "You should probably start thinking about moving on. Marcus wouldn't want you hanging around the family out of obligation." I stared at him. I was holding a paper plate with a slice of pound cake I hadn't eaten. I said, "I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because I'm his wife." He shrugged. He said. "You were his wife." That word landed like a stone dropped into still water. And the ripples never stopped. Over the next 2 years the pattern became clear. Patricia still called me occasionally, mostly to talk to Elijah on the phone. But the invitations thinned. Thanksgiving 2020, I drove 2 hours to Culpeper with a sweet potato pie and Elijah in his car seat, only to find that dinner had been moved to Keith's house in Richmond, and no one had told me. I sat in Patricia's empty driveway for 10 minutes, the engine running, the pie cooling on the passenger seat before I turned around and drove home. Christmas that year, I mailed Elijah's gifts to Patricia's house. She called to thank me but said Keith thought it might be confusing for everyone if I came to the family gathering. You understand, honey, she said. It's just hard for us to see you and not think about what we lost. What they lost. As though Elijah and I hadn't lost the very same man. As though grief had a ranking system and mine fell below theirs. But the moment that broke something inside me came in the spring of 2021. Marcus had a small life insurance policy, $250,000, and his military death benefits which I had used carefully. I paid off our modest house in Fredericksburg. I put $100,000 in a trust for Elijah's education. I lived simply. Marcus would have wanted that. Then Damon called me. It was a Sunday evening, April 4th. Elijah was in the bathtub, splashing with a rubber duck shaped like a tugboat. Damon said he was starting a restaurant. A barbecue place in Culpeper. He needed $60,000 in startup capital and he said, and these are his exact words, Marcus would have wanted his money to help family. You're just sitting on it. Just sitting on it. As if the benefits paid for my husband's death were a savings account I was selfishly hoarding. I told him no. Calmly. Curry. I said, that money is for Elijah's future, Damon. I can't do that. The next day Patricia called. He didn't yell. She never yelled. She just sighed and said, I wish you'd think about what Marcus would have wanted for his brother. Family helps family. And Keith. Keith texted me a single line, you were his wife. You're not a Davis. There was again. Were. Past tense. As if marriage ended at death. As if Elijah's blood didn't make me family forever. I didn't respond. I set the phone on the kitchen counter and I watched the screen go dark and I listened to Elijah singing in the bathtub. Some nonsense song about a fish, and I made a decision. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I called my friend Jolene the next morning. Jolene Washington. She was a JAG officer's wife I'd known since Marcus's first deployment, and she was the kind of woman who could say more with a raised eyebrow than most people say in a paragraph. I told her everything. The missed Thanksgivings, the uninvitations, the text from Keith, the money request from Damon. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Sweetheart, you don't owe anyone a share of the price you paid for losing him. That's not inheritance. That's blood money and you earned every cent of it in grief. That was the line I needed to hear. I called a family attorney in Fredericksburg, Sandra Pelletier on Princess Anne Street. I sat in her office on a Tuesday with Elijah coloring in a dinosaur book on the floor, and I told her I wanted to formalize everything. I wanted Elijah's trust ironclad. I wanted my financial boundaries documented. And I wanted to understand my rights regarding Marcus's burial site and memorial decisions, because Patricia had mentioned wanting to add a family plaque at their church, and I wanted to make sure no one could make choices about my husband's legacy without my consent. Sandra looked over the documents and confirmed what I already knew. As Marcus's surviving spouse and the mother of his only child, I held primary rights over his estate, his benefits, and decisions regarding his memorial. Patricia had no legal standing to redirect funds or make unilateral decisions about Marcus's legacy. I didn't do this to punish anyone. I did it to protect Elijah. And myself. 2 weeks later, Damon called again. This time he was irritated. I heard you went to a lawyer. What's that about? We're family. I said, I went to a lawyer because I need to protect my son's future. That's all. A week after that, Keith called. His voice was different. Less dismissive, more clipped. Controlled but uncertain. Mom's upset, he said. She thinks you're trying to cut us out of Marcus's memory. I said, no one is being cut out. But I won't be pushed out either. Silence. Then he hung up. 3 weeks passed. Then Patricia called. And for the first time she didn't sound righteous or passive or tired. She sounded scared. Are you going to keep Elijah from us? She asked. I felt the weight of that question. Because she loved that boy. Imperfectly from a distance on her own terms. But she loved him. And Elijah deserved to know his grandmother. No, I said. I would never keep Elijah from you. But I need you to understand something, Patricia. I am not a guest in this family. I am Marcus's wife. I am Elijah's mother. And I will not beg for a seat at a table that Marcus built. She was quiet for a long time. I could hear a clock ticking in the background. An old mantel clock Marcus had told me about, the one his grandfather brought back from Korea. I know, she finally said. Her voice cracked. I know you are. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in 2 years. And then came Arlington. It was November 2022, just after Veterans Day. I took Elijah to visit Marcus's grave as I did every year. Section 60. The rows of white stones stretched out in every direction, impossibly even like teeth set in the earth. The sky was iron gray and the ground was damp from overnight rain, and the air smelled like wet leaves and cold stone. Elijah was 5. He understood death the way 5-year-olds do, as an absence, a shape where someone used to be. He knew his daddy was a soldier. He knew his daddy was brave. He carried a small American flag he'd gotten from a Veterans Day assembly at his kindergarten, and he pressed it into the soft ground beside the headstone with tremendous concentration. That's when the stranger appeared. He was standing 3 rows over, visiting another grave. Tall, weathered, early 60s. The field jacket he wore was authentic 10th Mountain Division patches, the same unit Marcus served with. He had a paper cup of coffee from the visitor center, and his hands were shaking slightly, though whether from the cold or something else I couldn't tell. Elijah noticed him, and before I could stop him, he walked over and tugged the man's sleeve. Excuse me, sir. Did you know my daddy? The man looked at me. I saw his eyes travel to the headstone I'd been standing beside. He read the name, and his whole body changed. He went down on one knee, then both knees, right there on the wet November grass. He put his hands on Elijah's small shoulders, and he said, Staff Sergeant Davis? Marcus Davis. I nodded. I couldn't speak. His name was Frank Morello, retired first sergeant. He had served with Marcus during his second deployment. And on a night in July 2018 in a district south of Kabul, their convoy was ambushed. Frank's vehicle was hit. He was pinned. And Marcus, my Marcus, the quiet one, the dependable one, the one his family took for granted, ran across 40 meters of open road under fire, pulled Frank from the wreckage and carried him to cover. Marcus never told me that story. He never told anyone. I only learned later that he'd received a commendation for it, buried in paperwork I found in a filing cabinet after he died. Frank was crying. Not quietly. Openly, fully, the way men cry when they've held something for years and finally set it down. He looked at Elijah and said, Your daddy was the bravest man I ever knew. And I think about him every single day. Elijah patted Frank's shoulder. The way children do, instinctive, unscripted, pure. It's okay, he said. My daddy's watching. I lost it. Right there in Section 60, surrounded by the honored dead and the November cold and this stranger who knew a version of my husband that even I hadn't fully seen. I wept, and Frank stood and put his arm around me, and for 5 minutes the 3 of us stood there together in the gray light. That was 3 years ago now. Frank and I stay in touch. He sends Elijah a birthday card every August with a handwritten note about something Marcus said or did. Last year's card read, Your dad once shared his last granola bar with a stray dog in Kandahar. That tells you everything about who he was. Patricia and I have rebuilt something. Not what it was. Something different. Something more honest. She drives to Fredericksburg once a month to see Elijah. She brings peanut butter cookies, Marcus's favorite, and she sits on my living room floor and plays trucks with her grandson, and sometimes she looks at me and says, Thank you for not giving up on us. Keith sent a letter. A real letter on paper in an envelope. It said, I was wrong about a lot of things. You were always a Davis. I read it twice, folded it, and put it in the drawer beside Marcus's dog tags. I haven't responded yet. I might. Someday. Damon never opened the restaurant. He called me last Thanksgiving to ask how Elijah was doing. It was a short call, but it was a call. Weary, not healed. I don't think families ever fully heal from this kind of thing. But we're honest now. And honest is a place you can build from. If this story feels familiar to you, if you've ever been the strong one, the quiet one, the one they lean on without noticing, I want you to hear what Jolene told me and what I've come to believe with everything in me. You don't have to earn your place in a family. Your place was built by the love you gave and the love you carry. And no one gets to tell you that love is past tense. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. We tell stories here about ordinary people who carry extraordinary weight. People like you. People like Marcus. Thank you for listening.